Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 361. Welcome back to my co-host, Mr. Jordan Tyra. How are we?
Very good, thank you. Looking forward to this one, very much so.
Yes, I thought you might be because we welcome onto the podcast Jamie Goldsmith. Jamie, how's things?
Good, thank you. How's things your end?
Very good, mate. Very good. They've probably not had quite as much success as yourself recently, so we want to dive into that in a little bit. And I'm keen to discuss some of that, especially the back end of last season. But Jamie, we always start in the same place with our guests, and that's you and your background. So can you give us a little bit of a rundown on your career so far?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I suppose like most people that come on, I'm a failed footballer in some regard. Found myself in the US doing a soccer scholarship and was really fortunate that my uncle was a groundsman at West Ham. So I came home at Christmas and to help shovel snow off the pitches, and got introduced to Eamon Swift, who was head of sports science in the academy at the time. And we sort of arranged that I'd come home and do an internship at West Ham, and it coincided that at that time Eamon got promoted to the first team. So I was really fortunate to go straight into a first team internship whilst doing an undergrad. So I spent 3 years at West Ham as an undergrad, and then a year as a master's student, and then left to go to Charlton. Really great organisation, really good establishment for development. There's been loads of players and staff that have come out of Charlton that have done really well. From Charlton, I went to Hull. Really different experience at Hull. Totally different club, like from culturally to the style of play that they produce to the philosophy of the sports science department and how they went about that. But a really good experience. From there, I went to Notts County, where myself and Jordan crossed paths very briefly. That was short-lived, and I'm sure that's a story for another time. But yeah, from Notts County, I then ended up at Palace. So I've been at Palace. This is my 7th season now. Been in a capacity as S&C coach, head S&C coach, and now sort of as a more operational role as head of sports science, sort of managing the club-wide strategy alongside the current manager's philosophy. So that's the short version.
Jamie, just on that, in terms of the different clubs you've been at, you mentioned like different cultures, different styles of play, obviously different managers, coaching staff, and all the rest of it. How much does that impact you in your position? And I know we'll probably touch on this in your current role in a little bit as well, in terms of some principles, but how much does that change of club, change of coach impact what you do?
Yeah, I think it's probably the biggest thing. Like, it's our role is probably is a problem-solving role primarily, in that you get given problems to deal with on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and it's how you go about solving those problems on different scales. And I think early on in my career at Charlton and at West Ham, you have a really rigid belief of what is right and wrong. And I think the longer time's gone on, the more grey I've learned to become. And ultimately, it's about supporting managers and allowing managers to implement what they want to implement without abandoning your principles, essentially. And that was a real lesson at Notts County. I mean, I went in with Kevin Nolan, and it was over after 4 or 5 games. And then the new manager came in, and I was really defensive of what had gone on before, and was quite protective of the philosophy and the processes that had gone before, probably because I was involved in them. And it probably antagonised the new manager rather than just embracing his philosophy and trying to find a way to help implement that while sticking to our beliefs and principles. I was probably a bit too forceful with my own beliefs, and it just started on the wrong foot. So I think the biggest lesson that I've learned over working with managers is that we're a support network. We interviewed a member of staff a couple of years ago, and he said a really good thing that has always resonated with me. He said, we're Sherpas. We get to climb the mountain every day with the players and the coaches, but we'll never reach the summit. And I'm quite comfortable with that. In that I'll support where I can, but I'm comfortable knowing that I'm not the one that goes on the pitch, and I'm not the one that's heads on the chopping block whether we get 3 points or not. So ultimately, my role is to find a way, whether the manager wants to do a 4-day lead-in, a 5-day lead-in, 2-day lead-in, to find ways to allow the manager to do what he believes is the right thing, while not abandoning our principles of loading consistently, of sprinting as often as possible, as within reason, of making sure there's undulation and avoiding training monotony, all those things, alongside the beliefs of the manager.
I think that's really interesting, that, and I think that's been echoed by a few people in terms of the sort of correlation with experience as well, isn't it? Because you just admitted yourself, like in different roles, it was a different sort of approach, a probably more defensive approach. But over time, you've been exposed to different managers, different beliefs, maybe, and the styles of play that they adopt. And it's just really interesting to hear it. This is where you now see yourself in this support role, and I think it's really important, isn't it?
Yeah, and I also think that it's really easy to in football clubs, you see it a lot, that you think that your component is the most important component because it belongs to you, right? And that's not exclusive to S&C coaches. You see it in analysts, you see it in chefs, you see it in kitmen, right? And ultimately, so as an S&C coach, your bias is that you should load. You need to load once a week. Like gym loading is really important. And probably the two most successful periods that I've had, as far as like availability is been concerned, is a 5-day lead-in under Patrick Viera and a 4-day lead-in under Oliver Glasner, where we don't have a genuine loading day. So straight away, the thing that you perceive or believe to be the most important thing, because it's your area of expertise, gets taken away, relatively speaking, and then you have success in terms of availability. So perhaps it's not about us. Perhaps it's about the football. And in my experience, if you get the football bit right and you build relationships and you can win battles or influence managers effectively in the big thing, which is football, of course, then the small thing, which is athletic development, S&C, in the grand scheme of things, is a lot easier to manage.
That's a real skill as a coach, though, isn't it? The understanding on the football side, but also the, I suppose, adaptability in a way to know where you're needed and when.
Yeah, and I think the thing is learning to speak the manager's language. So I'll speak because they're the most recent managers I've worked with. But Patrick was very much, he wanted to work hard. We trained. It was a 5-day lead-in, and he was very in tune with data, and he knew what he wanted from sessions from a data point of view. Roy was far more intuitive and had so much experience. It was really impressive. And Roy's the communication to Roy was around units of time. So rather than discuss GPS metrics, it was, well, time's going to be our biggest variable, and we'd use time as the language or the focal point to manage load. Whereas Oliver now, Oliver's very, very switched on, and the 2 units of communication now are percentage of match load. So what does that session look like compared to a game? And then what is that session compared to our norm for the same session? So ultimately it's around knowing what the manager wants to hear and how he likes to communicate, and then being able to then provide information that can inform decision making around what the manager's beliefs are.
I think that's fascinating, isn't it, Jordan, in terms of the different approaches from managers, their different priorities, but then how Jamie's role and other staff's role then fit within that.
Yeah, I think, again, some brilliant points, Jamie, you made there in terms of knowing your place. I love the Sherpa quote. That's fantastic. I'm stealing that straight away.
Yeah, that's Liam Keane.
There we go. Thank you very much, Liam. We'll take that one. But yeah, it's spot on in terms of, and I want to take you back to the Notts County days. We will talk about it because we were both there at the club through some tumultuous times. But I think we had a catch up on the phone last week. But what I think we both learned from our time there will stick with us. And like you say, in terms of learning, you can forget the S&C quality. You can forget about, like you said, the big rocks that we always talk about your lifting patterns, all this sort of stuff. Just the interpersonal skills, and like you said, in terms of the new managers come in and you're trying to then find your place in that. You know, how would you say, just to give the listeners an idea, that then shaped your next role and your role after that and going forward, would you say?
Yeah, I think we touched on it briefly. It's about knowing how you could influence things, and because you're only as good as what you can influence, right? And I think that was the big lesson from Notts County, and the Notts County experience is quite unique for me in that it was a difficult time, but I still look back on it with an element of fondness because it's a good club and there's really good people there. I think it was just a very unique storm that we were both involved in, and I think that plays a part, doesn't it? Everything going on behind the scenes, and when things get tough, people become quite insular, and it probably needs the opposite, doesn't it? And I think that happened at the time, and people become quite insular and worried about their own component. And Stuart Williams talks about it loads, about systems, about it's the component, the relationship, and there's components of relationships and expertise. And sometimes you get bogged down in the expertise and not the components. And then the most important thing is how the relationships of all those components within the system, whether that's the human body, whether that's in a department, whether that's in a football club. And if the relationships between those components are fragmented, then I think it's a non-starter.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of saying it, actually, breaking it down into, like you say, literally components, because both were there. We felt it in terms of it was a difficult time to be at a club, and like you say, the departments felt fragmented, everything felt fragmented, and then lo and behold, it all went a bit the wrong way, should we say? So I just think it's really important, like you're saying there, because we obviously on this podcast we speak about sports science and S&C being how important loading patterns are. So flipping that, and then what you were saying in terms of actually the best availability you've had in terms of your squads wasn't around what we usually typically focus on, like the big rocks. Like I say, it's actually around actually just doing the right thing for the right manager at the right time. So just talk us through a bit of obviously we had the good catch from the phone, like I say, in terms of some of the systems you've got going on at Palace and how it's all working, because let's be honest, there's some success that's been going on at the club recently. So yeah, if you're happy to share some of what you're doing at the minute and how it's all going, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been at the club 7 years and it hasn't been a success. So there's been one season where there has. So I'm not going to take credit for that because I've been here when there's not been a success. So I've been fortunate to be part of a really, really successful journey. But the way we work is very much principles based. So we have principles that we believe are right, and everything we do is based around themes. So regardless of the manager, regardless of the leading, and regardless of the week, essentially, we just match themes. So the current manager works intensive, extensive, and then we have 2 tactical days that lead into the game. So, and we've done the same with Roy, although it was a British model, and we've done similar with Patrick and a 5-day leading. In that we just match themes up from the football session. So if it's the whole program is based around complementary training units. So we want everything to complement each other for that day. So I'll go through the day. So lads come in and essentially they prep their body for the day. They have their individual prep, which is based on screening. We use some of the PRI concepts. We use some of the Gary Gray concepts of like 3D maps and applied functional science. We use Exos heavily around that, almost like soft tissue prep, mobility, stability as a continuum. But essentially, lads prep their body for the day. Then they come into a team activation session, and it is then how do they prep for the session. So that is purely based on the preceding football content. So if it's an intensive day, you'll see bigger joint angles and longer ground contact times, relatively speaking. And the flow of every activation follows a simple position, pattern, power. Can you get into a position, whether that's through mobility or through ISO holds? Can you then coordinate through a pattern that looks like what you're going to do on the pitch? And then can you apply force or power through those patterns in the context of how you're going to do it on the pitch? So every day follows that. Soft tissue prep, mobility, stability, position, pattern, power. On an extensive day, you might see much more upright A positions and shorter ground contact times, relatively speaking. On a recovery day, it might be slower, exaggerated flow type actions. And on a -1, it might be more acceleration based because it's quite concentric and we want lads to feel quick without leaving anything on. So ultimately, the individual prep is the same. The team prep is the same. Flow and pattern and layout, it just changes depending on what the lads are going into. And we believe that, so we call explosive strength is power. We have reactive strength, which is obviously short of ground contact time. We squat, lunge, hinge, bridge every single day. And the things that we believe are important, we do as often as possible. And I think we spoke on the phone that, like, last season, we looked at our data. We had over 180 odd activation exposures into the lads, and on average. And we had around 25, 26 lower body strength sessions that we got into the lads. So if you think that lower body strength is how we're going to move the needle, then I think we're kidding ourselves, because you're missing out on 180 odd opportunities to get better. So we just use general strength every single day to just make sure lads feel good, move well, and can go out and apply force effectively on the pitch.
Class. That's such a good breakdown, isn't it? Like, just into hearing how things are adapted, and probably how people treat things more, I suppose, traditionally, or however we want to explain how people would look at a weekly schedule. It's interesting, John, isn't it, to hear that?
Yeah, and I think okay, we spoke on the phone before, but I do like the point that Jamie's making there in terms of you've got 80 odd, times to actually get some contact in with the players in terms of activations or pre-training. And yeah, 25, 26 in terms of your actual lower body strength. So if you look at that as a ratio, it's ridiculously small in terms of the lower body strength and power stuff. So yeah, I do think it's one of those where just little and often, there's no secret bullet, is it? It's little and often works really, really well. So it sounds like it has been, Jamie. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I also think it's all relative with the problems you're trying to solve. So Fraser Finley done an article for Sportsmith on our implementation of run specific ISOs, and that was a big part of our program under Patrick. And we used to do those. We used to do the hip ISO explode on an extensive day, and ankle ISO explode pre-training on an intensive day. And we had really good. It was a staple of our program, and through the work of Ollie Way and Fraser Finley, and then Liam carried that over. It was a big part of our program. And then Patrick left and Roy came in, and we tried to shoehorn it into Roy's program. We had a day off in the middle of the week, and how effective that stimulus was diminished massively, because we all of a sudden had a traditional loading day. So something that was a staple of our program, and at the time, if you'd have asked me, if you move clubs, what will you do? What will you take elsewhere? I'd have hung my hat on that process. Whereas now, the process was extremely effective in that program of a 5-day lead-in with no loading opportunities in isolation, but then was quite ineffective in a British model where you have the Tuesday big session with a loading opportunity. So I think that's why we look at systems, and our program is a system, and there's a lot of emphasis on the system, and the methods within that system can change. Run specific ISOs are a method. Strength training is a method. Eccentric overload training is a method. Plyometrics are a method. And I think if the system's clear and consistent, then the methods can be changed. I think when you're married to methods, then I think that's a dangerous game. And I like to work on continuums of the effectiveness of summing. And that's just how I sort of measure efficiency, I suppose.
Of the mindset around just constantly adapting and looking to improve as well, because you said it a few times already that I used to take this approach, I'd hang my hat on this, but then this happened and I adapted. I think that's a real skill of a coach. No two seasons are the same. We hope that you're going to follow it with some success this year as well, like last year. But what's been the approach going into this season, Jamie? Because obviously you've had an extra game at the start of the season in terms of Community Shield. You then got into European competitions and others of things that have happened around that as well. But just in your position, what's been some things that you've been looking at this season to say, right, these are going to be some things that we're going to prioritise?
Yeah, so look, for me, it's an extremely new schedule and a new experience, but the manager has got loads of experience of it with Frankfurt and Wolfsburg. So the manager's been excellent in front loading our pre-season and getting work into the lads and building chronic load, because like you said, we went into a period of 5 games in 15 days at the start of the season, from the first Premier League game to the international break. 5 games in 15 days. And looking back, there's only one period last season that was comparable to that. So we're going to have to do that another 5 or 6 times, when last season we done it once. And we done it in December when lads were in the flow of and the rhythm of the season. So we're looking around at how we can microdose and how we can get work into lads. But the biggest thing is just the difference in the groups, I suppose. And it's something that the manager does excellently, is make sure the load between the starters and non-starters is as close as possible. We're in on a +1, which is not very good for my private life, but is very good for the sort of physical exposure of the non-starters. So that's probably become the most important day for us now, is the +1.
You got anything on that, Jordan?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in actually, because that's really interesting that the +1 is almost led. Would you say it's led by the manager more than you guys? Because typically it's the other way around, isn't it? The manager's sort of like, oh, yeah, not always, and I'm not painting all managers the same brush, but usually it's the physical staff, let's call them that are going, now we need to get the load up, we need to get the load up. But actually, if it's the manager that's coming and directing that, I think that's a really powerful statement, isn't it?
Yeah, we're really fortunate that the manager and all the successful managers that I've worked for are very explicit in their demands, and the demands of players and demands of staff. So we're really fortunate that the manager is very clear what he wants. He's very demanding, but he's also very fair. So when things aren't how he wants them, he'll be very direct in his feedback. And when things are how he wants it, he'll be very direct in his feedback as well. So again, when there's a clear direction from the top, it makes my life easier because we then facilitate that. And I suppose, in all honesty, it's an easier sales pitch coming from the manager than it is from us, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Has he brought anything else to the table in terms of his experiences, like you just mentioned, with the clubs that he's been at in Europe? Is there anything else that he's sort of brought out of, like, we used to do this? I know we've mentioned about moving clubs and them being so different. Is there anything that he's brought that we used to do it here at this club?
Yeah, so the biggest thing I'd say is CK. So we do CK every single day with the players, and it forms the basis of our management meeting every single day, and is a huge part of what the manager does and what he believes in. So that's been a real eye opener for me. I'd never had an experience with that before, but it's been a very, very interesting process that we've added, and that could be a whole podcast in itself on how I've implemented that. But ultimately, I think we're talking about our belief systems around CK and long term how that looks for us, because it's so powerful at the moment. And I think the reason it's so powerful for us in our environment is because the manager believes in it ultimately. So it forms the basis for our management meeting, and we can modify load or increase load or give recommendations based on that because the manager believes in it so much. And at first the manager was teaching us about it, but it's now at the point now where we have AI models in place. We have Ryan White and Elliot Webber are both exceptional sports scientists that we're very fortunate to have them, and they've created AI models, and we can predict whether based on training load, whether that's a normal, abnormal response from a CK point of view, and then raise that in meetings. So I'm quite proud that although it's something we'd never done before, and the manager sort of forced it upon us, that we've been able to implement something that we're all quite proud of, that's been able to help the manager even more than I think he expected.
It also shows his knowledge around on the sports science side as well, doesn't it? Like, he's obviously someone that's very knowledgeable on that side of things too. Is that right?
Yeah, he's very sharp, and his fitness coach is good as well, and he's been a big help for us. Just knowing and just tipping us up basically on what the manager likes and how he goes about doing things. So that's been a real help. So I suppose it goes back to that relationships thing again, doesn't it? In that CK has been a vehicle to build trust in the manager delivering his program and us supporting that program. So it's become a very important measure for us. Now, going back to the run specific problem, would CK be effective if the manager left? I don't know. Or would it be effective for another organisation where the manager didn't believe in it? I don't know, because my experience has been fairly positive. But I think it goes back to that consistent point of you're only as good as what you can affect, and CK allows us to affect quite a lot at the moment, or at least discuss quite a lot at the moment.
100%.
How are the players with that? Sorry, Jamie, in terms of, when you're talking to them about actually you've had a bit of an abnormal response and slightly higher response to a training day, are they like, looking at your blank face, I don't understand what that means, just let me know? Or is it like, oh yeah, cool, get it, let's crack on?
No, I think players are very in tune with data now, aren't they? And players want feedback. So I think initially, because it's a blood sample, there was resistance at first. But as time has gone on, and because players know that there's going to be action off the back of that measure, then they're receptive to it. I'd say is a short answer.
Nice.
One of the interesting things that we've found is anecdotally, and we're looking to do some studies on this and merging some of like James Wild's work on the quadrants and ground-based versus air-based, and some of Jonas's work around like PSR. What we're finding anecdotally is that ground-based players respond better to intensive days versus air-based players. So an air-based player will spike more after an intensive day, where a ground-based player won't. But then ground-based players tend to spike more off the back of extensive days versus air-based, if that makes sense. So we're seeing a little bit of evidence that strategy or body type or I suppose motor preference has a big influence on internal response to session types, which is very, very interesting.
That's real in-depth individualization, that as well, isn't it? Because you're now preempting, like say, if you've got ground-based players and you know you're going into an extensive day and you've got a big game at the weekend, you're now going, right, we can predict that those boys are probably going to spike a little bit. Let's just keep an eye on them. And then I'm guessing that's just made your life easier, is it?
Well, don't get me wrong, we're not at that point yet where we're being really aggressive with our prediction and we're saying that making bold recommendations. It's just an anecdotal observation that we've found through looking at data that we think is interesting, that we're trying to now investigate further. But I think the skill is cross-referencing all of the components again. I know I keep talking about components, but like if CK is high, so we model it against workload. So CK might be high, and we may want it to be high. We may have a player returning from a long-term injury that's gone into training and has had a high response, and the lads with chronic load have had a low response. Well, we're comfortable with that because we know why that response is high. So is it an expected response? Yes or no? Is the first question, and then is it an abnormal response? Yes or no? They're the two questions, I suppose. So player returns to training, high response. Well, based on the load, it's unexpected, but then based on the one step back, they've just returned to team training. Well, it's not abnormal because it's essentially that player's pre-season, for example. So that's just how we use it, and that's not to say it's the right way. It's just the way that we've found it works and it's effective in our program.
Love that. Yeah, this detail on the individualized side is really interesting, isn't it? Because I know players are craving this more and more and wanting this feedback. Is there anything else that you see on that side, Jamie, in terms of individualization, not just in terms of fatigue or recovery, anything that you're looking at going, this is where we can support players more on an individual basis?
Yeah, so we're fortunate that we're quite well staffed, so we can be individual. We have Ben Smalley is our head S&C coach, who is excellent, and Liam Keane is our first S&C coach, who's also excellent. And they have groups that they work in themselves. We have a number of physios, and like I say, it's all a continuum. So we look at pitch on one end and how the lads move and function on the pitch, and then bed on the other end. And I suppose we had a physio, Ollie Wade, who was hugely influential on the program from the PRI concepts and integrating how structure determines function, or structure affects function, I suppose. And we have continuums of how does a body move and how does that inform our loading. So, for example, if someone is in bilateral extension, you probably don't do much eccentric overload hamstring work with them because it's going to feed that pattern, as an example. Someone is rotated left or right in an AIC pattern for the PRI stuff, then we probably won't do any bilateral lifting of them. So that's from that end. And I think the biggest change in my philosophy is that when I first started, and certainly in a Premier League club where there's so much data, that I was bogged down, and I'd Nordic, and someone would be 5-6 times body weight for a Nordic, and they'd get injured, and I'd say, well, it's not my problem, not my fault, they're strong. We'd do a CMJ, and we'd find a way to shoot or circumstantially find ways to prove that would influence the pitch. So it's like, eccentric mean power is up. Are they going to be good at change direction? Or RSI score is above 3. They've got low contact times. They're going to be quicker, for example. And we just didn't know. We were just trying to circumstantially find evidence for that. Whereas now, through Jonas and Stuart Millen and the profiling, and through AI, essentially, we now use the pitch to govern all of our profiling. So rather than doing what I believe in the gym might improve performance, I'll just measure performance, and that may be through view motion, predominantly at the moment, and we're trying to find ways where we can have in situ measures like like force velocity profile in situ. We're trying to find ways that we can, how can we profile what lads do in training and games and work back from the gym to either maximise what makes them excellent or hide deficiencies that may hold them back. That was a long answer, I'm aware, but I'm quite passionate about that.
I think that's a great answer in terms of approach as well, because I think we're all very guilty as S&C coaches thinking that, if we add 1.5 centimeters onto a CMJ, we're like, oh, they're such a better athlete now. And then you go and watch them on the pitch and you don't notice any difference whatsoever. So I think actually working the other way around and going, well, actually, this is their problem on the pitch. How can we now affect that in the gym? Yeah. That just makes a lot of sense to me. So no, thank you for going into that detail as well. Really appreciate it.
And I think it's important to hold yourself accountable to biomechanics. And I find that in my experience, and this is just my experience, so other people probably have got a solution to this problem. But when you have the British model with the Wednesday off, you become the temptation is to become lazy and just rely on that loading session post training on a Tuesday and kid yourself that's doing the job. And there's one really, really obvious case in my experience that we had a player who back squat over 200 kilos. His Nordic was well over 6 times body weight, but he had 3 3C hamstrings in a season and had a 4C psoas as well within a 12-month period.
Wow.
But we're sitting there going, oh, we can back squat 3 times body weight. Oh, you can Nordic 6 times body weight. It's not my fault. So then that individual athlete then didn't do one eccentric posterior chain exercise for 3 years post, and only done Bulgarian split squat with 15 kilos in each hand and didn't miss a game for 3 seasons. Now, I'm not saying that his availability was excellent because he didn't load, but are we feeding an already compromised pattern with more load? So if someone's a bilateral extender and an anterior pelvic tilt by battering eccentric hamstring exercises, are we just creating length where a structure's already long and just feeding a bad pattern? I don't know. Or are we making a structure stronger? So again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It goes back to that problem solving, right? With how do you identify an issue and then work back to try and find ways to solve that problem or find solutions.
Get a real insight into obviously your approach, but also the culture, I'm guessing, amongst the coaches that you're working with as well around this problem solving, because the way you're talking, it's very much, this is the route we took. This is some of the issues that came up. These are the things we considered, and this is the changes we made. And that's coaching, isn't it? That's how coaching should work.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and that's why I think it's really important to have like as big a breadth of experiences as possible, and that could even be in a form of CPD. Yeah. So you've got on one hand you've got the Exos approach, which is very systematic, very progressive, and is very structured. And then on the other hand, you've got sort of Gary Gray 3D maps, which is the body follows a path of least resistance type philosophy that can be quite philosophical and quite wishy-washy. But there's a time and a place for both, right? So how do you find a way to, and it's the same message, to get working, in inverted commas, inside a program that may not allow work all the time, which is how we find ourselves now.
Yeah, brilliant. Jamie, we can't get you on. We've referenced it a little bit. Let's talk about the FA Cup last year, because not every guest that we get on the podcast has big success like that. And forgetting about sort of sport science, S&C for a minute, let's just talk about the emotions of winning a competition.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly the biggest occasion I've been involved in professionally. I think it was a crazy week. The leading up to it, the FA Cup day, the suit, arriving in suits and all that stuff was excellent. And then the game itself was, I mean, my work thought I was exercising for 4 hours. So that weren't really enjoyable, but the end was exceptional. And the club done really well. And I think Newcastle were the first team to do it. I may be wrong, but they rented out Box Park in Wembley. So the fans were downstairs and Family and Friends were upstairs with the players. So look, I said to Jordan, the feat is not comparable. But when I was at West Ham, we won the playoff final. And it just sort of fizzled out a little bit because everyone just done their own thing after. Whereas the club done really well in everybody being a part of it. So we had interns. We had a placement student that just by a roll of the dice, got the opportunity to work FA Cup games last year, and she's back at uni now, finishing her 3rd year at Leeds, and she was on the pitch. She worked the FA Cup final. She worked every single game. So the club is a really unique environment in that it's a little bit mad at times, but you get exposed to things you never would. So, like I say, it was really, really tight knit, the lead up and the celebrations. And the club done an excellent job at just being really inclusive. Everybody was there, and if you weren't at the game, on the pitch, you were in the stands, and if you were in the stands, then you were at the event afterwards. So it was a really, really good day and a mad week.
How do you go about sort of getting past that point and then getting into the new season from that? Is it just a buzz that continues? Because I imagine welcoming the lads. I know obviously we said about then having the Community Shield, but welcoming the lads back in after that off season must be very different.
Well, we played Wolves Tuesday night after the FA Cup final.
Yeah.
And won. So the lads done unbelievable. It's just like business as usual. And then we went to Anfield and drew on the weekend. So, I mean, that's nothing to do with me. That's just the manager and the players just being extremely professional. But yeah, pre-season, I think in anticipation for the Europe thing, and I know there's a lot going on in the background, but just knowing there's going to be a lot more fixtures, and I suppose the privilege of having success is that you have to work more, right? So that the way that people are looking at it internally, and that's a message from the staff, is that like this is the reward of being successful, is more work, right? So that's how we're looking at it, and we try and be really systematic with when we work and when we pull back a little bit. But it's all a learning curve for me. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know the answer to that question.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because when you hear a lot of coaches that have won numerous trophies and also back-to-back wins, the likes of Ferguson and all the rest of them, that's very much the case with them, isn't it? They win, you celebrate, you get back on to doing what you're going to do, whatever changes you're going to make, and then you go again.
Yeah. And one thing I would say is I've never won anything of any note in my life. And I didn't win the FA Cup, and the players did. But it does change. Like, it is infectious. So, like, in years gone by, I've looked at perhaps the Carabao Cup as a hindrance and thinking, let's just lose respectably early on so we can get the schedule settled. Whereas now, I don't know, I can't speak on others, but I'm thinking we can win this. Like, we've entered in the 4th round. There's only 3 games to the final. Like, let's try and win that. And like I say, I have no role in whether we win it or not. So I'm not sitting here saying that it's just me, but I want to win it. Whereas before I would have been like, I don't really matter. I'd rather a bit of time off. So I would say winning is infectious, and I've never experienced that before. And that's probably the biggest change that the manager's brought to the culture, is that just winning mentality.
Yeah, that's essentially what the players are wanting as well, isn't it? They're not wanting to go into competitions. Once they get that sniff of it, like they want to go again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
How are you looking forward to Europe this year then? I know you talked about the schedule and stuff, but there's going to be some mad trips in there. So, what you think? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we've been fortunate with the logistics. I mean, we played in Norway a couple of weeks ago, and that was tough logistically. It was an artificial pitch. It was there was no local airport, so the operations guys had their work out there. But it's been kind to us. Say kind. We played Dynamo Kiev away in our first game. And that's in Lublin, I think that's how you say it. We play Strasbourg away and Shelbourne away, so they're not too far, they're not too abstract, the places. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out.
Yeah, I feel like Kiev away might be, because where are those games played now?
Yeah, so we play in Lublin, which is in Poland.
Yeah,
it's near the Ukrainian border.
Yeah, cool.
Although I think there's been some drone activity around there, so I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah, not usually what you prepare for, is it?
Yeah.
What about how that impacts training and sort of scheduling? Because obviously that's extra games. You're hoping to have another cup run or maybe a couple of cup runs as well alongside that. How does that impact it?
Yeah. So we go. I think when we get back from the international break, I think we play. I want to say 19 games in 60 days. So the manager's been really clear from from day one of pre-season that we've got to make the most of our training opportunities, and that has been correct. So I think the lads have got a really good quality load into them, and like I said earlier, that it's about making sure that the gap between the lads that are playing and the lads that aren't playing doesn't increase, and keeping those as close together as possible. So I think that it's just about playing for the starters or the lads who start, and then making sure that the lads who don't start get an appropriate work in, so that when they're called upon, that then they're able to contribute, I suppose.
Class. Jamie, I know this is something we'll wrap things up in a second, but I know this is something you discussed in our meeting down at FSCR, and it's something we've done podcasts on recently and had a few discussions around. This is the external practitioner, the whole debate that a lot of people are talking about. We'd love to get your views, because I know Jordan mentioned it was something you spoke about from your perspective at your club. How do you see it?
Yeah, look, I think first and foremost, I need to make it really clear that I'm not the industry spokesperson for this topic. So
it's all on you, mate.
So I'm not. Please don't quote me on my ideas on what best practice looks like. But how we approach it is just through trying to be as transparent as possible, and that probably isn't exclusive to external practitioners. That's how we operate, really. So if we want to do something, we'll give the reasons why, and it goes back to that Simon Sinek stuff that started why, that why, what, how. How are you doing it? Well, we can discuss that. What are you doing? We can discuss that. But ultimately, if people don't believe in the why, then there's going to be a breakdown in the reason. So players are working with external practitioners. What's their why? It's probably because they want to get better. So let's not discourage lads wanting to improve, but then let's be really transparent with how you're going about doing it. So when are you doing it? What days you're doing it? And then what you're actually doing, and does that fit with the appropriate schedule? So I think it's easy to get bogged down in the why and the sort of emotional connotations of why you're doing it. Is it because our program's not good? Is it because you don't believe in X, Y, or Z? Or that, I think it's stay away from that, and let's be open and transparent with what you're doing and how you're doing it. Really, that's our approach. We have a number of players that work with private coaches, and we try and be as open at our end and try and ask for the same back. And in fairness, more often than not, it's been okay from us. We've not had any negative experiences with that, or too many negative experiences.
Yeah, and I just want to jump on that in terms of at the FSCR event, which if people aren't already aware is on the community page. Go and watch it. All the presentations are on there, and just to add on to that, actually, the presentation you did for us, going really into depth on what's going on at Palace, was outstanding. So I would encourage the listeners, if you haven't, this is a little taster essentially of what's going on at Palace, but even more in depth was led by Jamie back then. But you did mention in terms of trying to get eyes on occasionally and the transparency element. You said we actually do invite them into the club, and they can come and train our players at the club. Is that still the case? That's still going on?
Yeah, we have had occasions where we do that. Off season mainly. We try not to do it when it's busy, because I don't think it sends the right message, and that everyone can just there needs to be an element of exclusivity to how we work, and it needs to be safe and private when needs be. But we invite people in, and we have had occasions where they've come and worked on our premises, and we have a lot of occasions where they'll come in and just have a coffee with us, and just to have that icebreaker and to build relationships, and try not to make too much of a big deal out of it. So if a player has a physio allocated to them in the building, and then a physio they work with privately, then those two people will just talk openly on a regular basis, and it's not got to be a big thing, and that will be relayed in meetings and stuff. But yeah, just try and do what's in front of you, I suppose.
It's just common sense, isn't it? At the end of the day, I mean, we've had the same at players, Bournemouth players and academy players. I've gone in to what used to be my place of work and just chatted with the sports scientist and said, by the way, we've got such and such in. Have you done his latest growth and maturation, measurements or whatever it might be? If you've got his latest testing, is there anything you want us to work on? Cool, we'll go and do that. So, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of the transparency element is the best way of doing that. So, yeah, thank you for again sharing on that.
Yeah, and look, you're not going to agree on everything, are you? But
no.
if the only communication you have is negative and is saying no, then you're less likely to influence that decision, are you? Whereas if you can build credit and say, okay, that's fine, or okay, he's going to load of you tonight, so we're going to do it at our training ground, he won't, here's the session that we were going to do. Do you mind sending on you're going to do? And then you can have communication around what both believe fits. Then the time when you say, look, don't load tonight because we play whenever, you're more likely to have impact because you had 4, 5, 6, 7 times where you've had positive interaction.
Right, yeah.
So again, I think like we spoke about loads, but I think it just goes back to relationships and interactions, doesn't it? And trust.
100%.
The other thing to highlight is for any external coaches listening to the detail that Jamie and the team are going into around the support for their players, you've got to respect that as well. And you should know the level of detail that these coaches are going into. And if you're not having the communication with them from external side to in club, then that's going to be an issue because of that. You're not understanding exactly what they're looking at and the work that they're doing. So, no, Jamie, I fully appreciate you going into not just that, but everything you've covered in the podcast. I think the level of detail, it's fascinating to hear sort of your approach on and experiences and how things have adapted and changed for you under the different managers is really fascinating as well. And I know a lot of people will take a hell of a lot from that. So I just want to say a massive thank you to you for coming on and being so open and sharing.
No, thank you for having me. Really, really appreciate your time.
If there's anyone that wants to reach out, mate, if they've got questions, is there anywhere you'd push them?
Yeah, I have social media, but I don't use it much. I suppose LinkedIn. I suppose LinkedIn's the best place. My Twitter is Jamie_Goldsmith, but it's private. So unless you already follow me, it probably won't be much good.
LinkedIn's perfect, mate. That's top. Jamie, thanks a lot. Really appreciate your time.
No, thank you.
Speak soon, mate.
Take care.
John, I really enjoyed that one. I thought Jamie was top class. I know he spoke really well at our event at FSCR, which I know you referenced, and people can go and watch the presentation. But I just said to you before we hit record again that I feel like it's so refreshing hearing a coach speak like that. That this is the approach that I took. These are some of the challenges that came up. This was our sort of thought process as a team, and then this is what we decided on. And then like a rinse and repeat of that, which sounds easy and obvious, doesn't it? But I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and it's, again, I think you just said it just before we started recording. It's sort of it's a no ego thing in that we've got. I keep referencing the big rocks. Sorry if I keep going back to that, but like we've got our big rocks, and that's what we work around. And a lot of people and a lot of coaches just will never budge from that.
Yeah.
And yet, like you said, like in the traditional British model, some stuff wasn't working. But with the 5-day lead-in, it worked brilliantly. So all of a sudden, those big rocks, you're throwing them out because you've got to change it. Whereas I think some coaches and some environments would really struggle with that and go, no, but we've built our entire philosophy around this. We can't change, and yet they have changed, they've adapted, and look, they get good results, and he underplayed it massively, but Palace have been a successful, like they're a very good team. They're a very good team. If you look at how they play, if you look at, the sort of playing style they have, and also the prospects which they've sold on, and the players they've developed and brought through as well. So if anyone's been to the training ground as well, it's outstanding. The club have really invested in it well. It's one of the best in the country, but maybe even Europe now by a mile. And you just think they've just got a lot of things right, I would suggest. And I think Jamie's approach on all what the team are doing, and the fact it comes right from the manager, so right from the very top, there's clear instruction into sports science as well. When he's talking about CK and all this sort of testing that's coming from the main man, that's going to be really powerful. So it just seems like a very good environment, and I think they've done things very, very well for sure.
I think the other thing is how we referenced that things come back from the pitch.
Yeah,
what happens on the pitch, which sounds obvious, but I think when we've worked in individual silos for so long and we've focused so much on jumps or this sort of strength work or whatever it is, and without really monitoring how much of an impact it has, switching it the other way just makes complete sense, doesn't it? And he's obviously spoke about the differences between three managers that, looking from the outside, seem very different, but his approach and like going back to their principles and their way of working and working as the team, they found a way of making that work.
100%. And I think, I think that's a very good point, actually. When you think of Roy Hodgson's style to now Oliver Glasner's style, very different, very, very different. And Roy Hodgson's experience as well, like he's worked at the very top level, managed England. So, you're thinking there's going to be obvious differences there. And yet, as a bunch of staff, they have to be adaptable. They naturally have to be. So if you're going to go in and he referenced the time at Notts County, and we didn't delve into that too much because we've done previous episodes with Mike Brown and people on the time at Notts County, but it was a real tumultuous time. Like, it was nuts. I could do multiple podcasts on that, with all sorts going on behind the scenes. So to take big lessons from that time, I think says a lot about Jamie as well, because without being too open, he wasn't treated the best in that instance. And yet to look back on fondness and go, actually, I learned a lot from that time, I think is really, really powerful. And it shows that, what type of practitioner he is, that, okay, learn from that, move on, develop and reflect, and we go forward again. So yeah, big thank you to Jamie for coming on and being as open and honest about the work that's going on at Palace, and really giving us an insight into what they're doing. They're FA Cup winners, so something's going right.
Exactly. Yeah, maybe we have to do an episode in the future where we bring the Notts County crew back together and we do a proper reflection on it.
God, we can't do that.
We can discuss some of the things that we spoke about on the phone around that time, which were really interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
just on that though, Jordan, on that, a very seamless link onto your career.
Yeah.
I might have given a few little hints away, especially in the previous podcast. Give us a little update.
Yeah, so quite a big update, really. So jumping back into the world of full-time football, which I'm very excited about. It's one of those very, very rare occasions in the football world where I've somehow managed to align personal ambitions and what needs to happen with professional as well. So like I said, going to be jumping back into full-time football at Leicester City. So my official title is going to be PDP Sports Scientist, which I'm very excited about, working with age groups I've worked a lot with. And at one of, if anyone's been to Leicester training grounds, literally it's unbelievable. Arguably one of the best in Europe, certainly one of the best in the country. So, but the main thing is, from a personal point of view as well, is that obviously I moved down from the Midlands to move to Bournemouth and get the Bournemouth job, and then set up the hub down here on the South Coast. But all our family, I met my missus in the Midlands and all her family. We're engaged now as well. Got engaged in the bank holiday of August. So looking at the future and all this sort of stuff, we need to be quite a little bit closer to some grandparents and potential grandparents and things like that. So we're 4 hours away at the minute, and we love the South Coast. It's amazing. The hub will continue, which is great. Sam Chapman, who we've had on the podcast, who we know well, our head coach, is going to step in and take the day-to-day running of it. I will do the bits and bobs from afar that I need to do, but realistically, it's in a great place where Sam can, in my opinion, take it to the next level, which I think he will, because he's brilliant at that. But from a professional point of view, I'm very excited to be jumping back into full-time football. The training ground buzz is something you do miss, even though I love doing what I'm doing now and helping players. We've helped loads of players back to the pitch from injury, just general performance work, all that sort of stuff at the hub. But you never forget the training ground buzz. So to be back in that environment at a club like Leicester as well, and we obviously had Ollie Morgan present for us at the conference, and the work that's going on behind the scenes is unreal, like genuinely unreal. So the level of staffing structure, the processes they've got in place, all of that is top notch. So I'm really looking forward to get my teeth stuck into that one, really. So PDP Sports Scientists are going to have quite a big part, like I do at the hub now, in terms of end stage rehabs, mid stage rehabs, and working with players, sort of one-to-one, small group stuff, pitch based, gym based, all that sort of stuff, which I've sort of become. That's my main bread and butter now, really, at the hub, working with end stage and late stage rehab stuff. So doing it every day in a training ground like that is going to be great. So very much looking forward to it. It's a very short start as well, so you might be hearing less of me on the podcast, which I think a lot of people will be quite pleased to hear, probably, because you know what it's like trying to match football schedules up with podcasts. It isn't easy, but I'm very much looking forward to it. So fingers crossed it all goes well.
Well, mate, from me, massive congratulations. And I know, like you say, it aligns with everything that you and the family are aiming to do as well. So no, I'm really pleased for you. And we will be trying to keep Jordan on the podcast as much as we can. If he disappears for a while, I've not got rid of him. But maybe our schedules don't quite align for that episode. But listen, we'll be getting him back, and we'll also be getting you back as a guest as well. You can dive into some of the work that you're doing at Leicester too. So no, I'm excited for you, mate. I'm really pleased. And I know, there's some big times ahead.
Thank you very much. No, I appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully I'll be on the podcast as much as time allows.
100%, 100%. Well, thank you to everyone for watching and listening. I really appreciate it. And a big thanks to Jamie as well. I hope you took plenty away from that episode, which I'm sure you did. And just a final one for me, just go and check out the sponsors, Hytro, The Good Prep, and also Hawking Dynamics. And go and check out our latest networking event that's now available too. Hopefully we will see you there. Cheers, Jordan.
See you soon.